Well, it's like any job you have. I started off a dishwasher at Mama Rosa's restaurant when I was 16.
Just amazing. Okay, we'll start right now. I know you're busy.
Sure.
Are you filming in New York?
No, the filming was yesterday. I just had to do a thing for True TV on a thing they got coming up later this month to their advertisers. But no, I'm in the middle of the second stage of the book tour. I started it 2 weeks ago. I went back to Mexico, and then the book has been so successful they wanted to bring me back up for another week of publicity on it. So here I am.
It's just fantastic. Okay, here we go. 57 Gold Radio. This is Gary Cubetta back again, and it's my honor to introduce Governor Jesse Ventura. Governor, great to have you with us.
Hi, Gary. Great to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. Let's get right into it. Governor of Minnesota, very successful. You leave after completing your term, unlike some other governors that we may have seen lately, and you go and sign a deal with MSNBC.
Right.
And, at the time, you were the hottest free agent in the world of news television, right, Jesse?
Yep, that's correct.
And you did a few pilot shows, and then you kind of disappeared. And I always thought it was strange because you were so red hot at the time. Can you take me back, and what exactly happened with that?
Well, what happened was this. They created the whole show. We got all set to go on. I was supposed to be on 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, every night. They came out, and they knew what was going on with the entire show. They came out and said, we can't put this on the air. And the reason was, if you recall back then, MSNBC was not liberal. They were Fox Light. That's what I referred to them as. And the reason was because I was opposed to the Iraq War. They didn't. If you recall, right before the Iraq War, no one was on TV voicing any opposition to it. And the reason I know this absolutely, if you recall back, Phil Donahue had a show also at that time, and he was removed from the air. I wasn't even let on. Phil was MSNBC's highest-rated show. Have you ever heard of a network taking off their highest-rated show?
Well, I remember Phil was on at the time around 8 o'clock at night, and I watched the show, and Phil, of course, is more to the left, but I thought it was a good show, and they couldn't seem to get him off the air fast enough, and then, of course, you came up next.
Well, that's because Phil opposed the war, too.
Yeah.
We both opposed the war, and nobody was allowed. You telling me we got a free media? I don't think so. Now, what happened was I disappeared because I was under contract for 3 years. I couldn't do any news shows or anything on cable or satellite, so in essence, they had bought my silence. They paid me all 3 years. I was paid like a professional athlete. In fact, my home in Mexico today, you always name your homes. I came within an eyelash of naming my home Casa MSNBC because they bought it. I instead named it Casa El Hombre Rana. Do you know what that means?
No.
House of the Frogman.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
But I came close to it, but then I thought, why give them credit even though they bought it?
Jesse, I remember at the time, Drudge Report, they had a few articles posted, and they said that you were struggling doing the shows, and that always seemed strange to me because I had followed you in wrestling with Vince, and even before that, you never had a problem communicating with people, and suddenly they were kind of giving out impressions that you were having a struggle doing the show. Did that bother you, or was the contract so good you didn't even care?
Well, the contract, I honor contracts. I'm not one that breaks them. To me, a contract's a contract. But I have no trouble communicating. That was total BS that was being floated out for the excuse that I was opposed to the Iraq War and you were not going to get on TV and offer opposition to that invasion.
Now, Jesse, you mentioned Mexico, and I've heard you discuss this on almost every interview. You talk about it, and Larry King, you always mention it, and they never really follow it up. And I know you're on the Baja coast of Mexico, right?
Right.
What made you decide to pick that for a vacation home? Had you traveled there before?
Yeah, I vacationed down there right after I got out of office. Then I went and taught at Harvard in 2004. Then I went back down again in 2005, and that's when I fell in love with the place. It's beautiful. The weather's outstanding. When you come from Minnesota and spend as many winters as I have there, you've had enough. And so I'm fortunate enough, and the reason I did it also, it allowed me to go on an adventure. I'm getting older now, and the window of that opportunity is closing, and I wanted to be an adventure. I drive it every year. I don't even fly. I drive all the way down there, and I drive all the way back.
I've heard you mention that is there no electricity in the spot you're at?
Yeah, I live an hour from pavement and an hour from electricity. But I have electricity. My house is completely solar. I live off the sun.
Wow. Is this like a retirement or community, or are you in with...
Oh, no, I'm all by myself.
Oh, you're by yourself.
Pretty much. I mean, there's my neighbor, Mr. Gonzalez. He's a rancho around the corner from me, and there's actually where I live, there's about 4 or 5 houses in the general area, but they're rarely occupied. You know, people will come down for a month or so, but I generally go for 5 months.
Any security issues? You hear that Mexico's getting more dangerous, or is that a lot of...
No, it's true, but it's not. It's only at the borders, and it's our fault. It's completely our fault. And let me do a pitch here. I encourage everyone, please, if you know anyone in California, they are going to have the opportunity this fall to legalize marijuana completely. They should do that, because did you know 17,000 people have died at the border just this year?
No, I wasn't.
17,000. That's more than what's happening in these wars. And we can end it, because the prohibition of the war on drugs is identical to the prohibition of alcohol. All you do when you prohibit something is it doesn't go away. It just means it's going to be run by criminals, and you're going to make criminals very powerful and very wealthy. And that's what's happened here. We can disarm these cartels by legalization. That puts them out of business, and that's the only way it's going to happen.
Jesse, governor of Minnesota, you saw how policy's made in this country. What is your level of frustration with how the politicians are acting, how they've set us up for the future?
Well, here's as simple as you got it with the Democrats and Republicans. It comes down to this. They put their parties before the country. It's as simple as that. Their party comes first, the country comes second. And I can back that up with the most simple analogy. Okay, when we went into this tailspin of the economy, George Bush did the first bailout, correct?
Right, fall of 2008.
Yeah, all the Republicans vote for it. Then Barack Obama comes in and they all vote against it. And he does essentially the same thing. So that shows you right there. They vote for their party first, and we were warned. You know, Jefferson, Adams, and George Washington all warned us. They said that if the United States falls, it won't come from a force outside, it'll come from within. And they even told us what it would be. They said when political parties take over the government. And that's what you got today.
Now, I've heard you mention that if Sarah Palin were to become president, that I don't know if you were joking or half joking, that you would leave the country completely and move to Mexico. And I don't know what the chances of that are.
From what I'm hearing with this country, I say they're probably pretty good today.
So, wow.
Well, I mean, look at this. They're fighting over whether you can go to the doctor or not, and yet you got people talking about building more nuclear bombs. Why do we need more nuclear bombs? We can already blow up the world 10 times over.
Well, I saw you on with Geraldo a few weeks ago, and you were on stage with Mike Huckabee, and you made a comment, and that was that if you had a choice between putting a war on the credit card or health care for Americans on the credit card, you'd have picked the health care. And
absolutely, and instead we choose the wars.
So looking ahead, Jesse, you must wrestle with this in your mind. Do you think that it's a little bit hopeless here in the United States as far as you've met these people who are running the country? Do they have any clue as to how to get us out of this economic problem we're in?
Well, I certainly don't agree that bailing out the banks is the answer. I mean, they could have taken that money that they gave to the banks and they could have given it to every person in this country and they could have paid their mortgage off. Then you wouldn't have the problem, would you?
No, and instead...
Well, that's the point. See, they're bailing out the very people that got us in trouble. Instead of helping out the common person, they're doing the banks again.
So,
see, what I believe is happening? They're attempting to destroy the middle class in America to where they'll only be rich and poor. That way we'll be like every other country in the world, and that might lead, of course, to Canada, the U.S., and Mexico all becoming like the Euro then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and if you follow up on global warming, now, I don't know if global warming's real or not. I'm not a scientist. But what they have to solve it is baloney. This cap and trade does nothing to solve global warming. All it does is apply a new tax. You'll now be taxed locally, statewide, federally, and this will be your first international tax. Well, when they start collecting this money, I believe it's a front. The whole thing's a front to create a one-world government. And global warming is the mechanism to do it with.
Well, they're setting it up that the inside guys are going to make a fortune on this.
Oh, yeah.
And there's big money to be made. And
you can buy your way out of it. Cap and trade. Let's say you're Exxon and you're polluting like crazy. All you have to do is pay off, and you're called carbon neutral with money. You don't have to do anything about your pollution. Just buy your way out of it. That's what they got set up. So that leads me to believe global warming is not real, because they're certainly not using a real thing to solve it. They're simply using it as a mechanism to extract money.
Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, True TV, just completed the first season. It was excellent. Jesse, did did this come as a surprise to you that it was as successful as it was, or did you think it would come off this way?
Well, I was surprised it actually got on the air, because when they contracted me to do the 7 episodes, I had a gentleman's bet with my cast and crew. I said, we're going to do all these, but at the 11th hour, this stuff isn't going to see the light of day. And so I give great kudos to True TV. They had a lot of courage to put these shows on, and they've ordered 10 more. I go back into production a month from now.
Now, the show artistically is fantastic. In fact, I was surprised. Who's behind the production of it? Is it you, or is it? Do you have a whole?
Well, I play a part in it. My son's involved in it, and we're with A. Smith, a company out of Los Angeles that is the production company.
Yeah, I find it compelling. I mean, some of the conspiracies, I'm not sure how much of them. You don't really take a side in them. You're trying to call it down the middle to some extent, right?
Well, no. Well, the book I took the complete conspiracy side.
Right.
But the show, we're just asking questions. What happens is someone comes to me, like as a last resort, like the woman who lost her daughter at 9/11.
Right.
I believe her name's O'Connor, and she pleads with me. No one will listen. No one but you. And so that's really where I take it from, is the fact that, okay, we'll listen and we'll do what we can do to find out or learn the truth.
Now, you said you've been recontracted for 10 additional shows. Is there any problem coming up with 10 additional topics? I would guess not, if you've agreed.
Well, I thought there would be, and when I called the production company to ask, Jesus, there are 10 conspiracies? They said, don't worry, we're already at 20. It's going to be paring them down to get to 10.
How much?
Because there's a lot of them out there.
How much work? The shows look like there's a lot of work involved. You're not just sitting there for an hour and popping them together.
Well, a lot of people thought I'd just sit at a desk and be a moderator, but no, I'm out in the field. I'm going to these places. Like I went to Alaska to look at HARP and see what this thing is they built up there that they lie about. And that was a total lie, because they call it an unclassified research center. Well, if it's unclassified, why wouldn't they let me in?
Yeah, well,
so clearly it is classified, even though they're telling, and it also, HARP, that thing in Alaska, it's paid for by DARPA. Do you know who they are?
No.
Well, that's the most secretive part of the Pentagon.
Okay.
That's where they get their money, to the tune of $350 million. So you tell me they're already lying about it, because it's not unclassified. It's on a military base. And my knowledge, after 6 years in the Navy SEALs, the military doesn't do anything unless it has a military purpose to it.
The book, American Conspiracies, one of the best sellers, New York Times list, just a natural extension of the show, right?
Not really. I actually started on the book before the show.
Oh.
You know, the show came more out of the book. The book was first, really. Even though the book was released later, the book took longer time to do.
Now, you've been doing a lot of interviews, a lot of traveling. This is your first? No, you've done books before, but this is a big seller. What's it like doing all the?
This is my 4th New York Times bestseller.
Wow, what's that feel like?
Oh, pretty gratifying. Although, wait till you hear this.
Okay.
I've been on the New York Times bestseller list now, going on my 4th week in a row. Not one major media has critiqued the book.
Now, I hear this every once in a while. We have guests on our program, and they say the book's selling great, but the major media totally ignores me or us. What's that like, Jesse? I mean, they didn't ignore you when you first won the governorship in Minnesota.
Well, I think it's naturally the topic.
Yeah.
They don't want to, if they even to criticize the book. Well, I believe that their thought process is, let's ignore it, it'll go away. And so let's not do anything with it. Because if they do critique the book, then it gives me some more credibility, doesn't it?
Oh, of course.
Well, that's why I think it's not being critiqued.
And
I mean, how does the New York Times not critique it when I've been on their top 10 list now going on 4 weeks?
Yeah, that's a good question. Wow.
All their other books, if you go to the internet, all their other books have been critiqued, except mine.
So is it even more gratifying that they've ignored you, and yet the American public has embraced the book?
Very much so.
It's like you don't need the establishment. Well, you've proven that before, right?
Yep.
Jesse, I got to ask.
I'm the true rogue. You know, what's her name? Palin wrote her book and called herself a rogue. She ain't a rogue. I'm a rogue.
Jesse, I want to ask you about Sarah Palin. Really, I've heard you comment, and they kind of cut you off. Do you think she's simply? I know you're not happy with the fact that she resigned as governor, even though, well,
she resigned for the money. Come on, let's be truthful. She saw the dollar signs.
Do you think
she knew she was going to make millions of dollars? Why waste her time being governor anymore?
Do you think there are any qualifications within her whatsoever for any of these positions?
Yeah, she's fully qualified to be president because she's a perfect puppet.
Jesse.
She's the perfect president who won't be in charge. That someone will be pulling her strings, in my opinion.
In the back of your mind, I know you were on Larry King, and he asked you were thinking about maybe running for Senate, which I was thinking you wouldn't do, and you didn't do.
Well, I flipped the coin.
You flipped the coin. Is there anything there, the wheels are spinning thinking, I'd like to take this to Washington as president? Do you think about that?
No, because you'll notice with me, there's a great song called Long Time Gone by Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Okay.
And in the lyrics to the song, it says, if you're going to get yourself elected, you had better cut your hair. So until you see me shave my head again, I have no inclination to run again.
So that's the signal.
Yeah, if I shave my head, well, because I couldn't, in this country, you couldn't win an election with hair to your shoulders. Isn't that silly? I'm the same person. I'm the same brain. But if you got long hair down to your shoulders, you can't run for office.
Jesse, if you ever, being governor of Minnesota, once you get in, is it a helpless feeling, or are there things that you could actually do to make things be better? Or is it?
Oh, it's not a helpless feeling by any means. I accomplished a great deal in my 4 years as governor of Minnesota. You have to remember, when you're a governor, no one else can boss you around in the state. You're the boss.
So there isn't so much a feeling of frustration.
Oh, not at all. It's a great feeling of satisfaction of the things that I revamped the entire property tax system in the state of Minnesota. I put in the first light rail line. I can't even remember. Right now, it's been 7 years. I can't remember everything I did. Oh, I gave back tax rebates when we had surpluses directly to the people. If you want a stimulus package, do it the way I did it. Give it to the people, not the banks.
So if we could get you to cut that hair, and if by some fluke we could get you on all the ballots in 50 states, and you did get in the White House, do you look at it and think, I could fix some of these problems?
I don't think, if you read my book, I think you'll see clearly I would never get to the White House. You follow what I'm saying
there?
Well,
yeah. Well, people like me think that you could and you should, and I guess there are a lot of traditional folks who think
but if you're 6 feet under, how can you do it?
That think that maybe something like that wouldn't be physically possible with
Do you think for one moment that the status quo power structure of this country would allow me to become the president? No. Someone who, here's the most, you notice they never talk about my election in Minnesota very much. You know why? Do you know how much money I raised to become the governor of Minnesota?
Less than $1 million. I know that.
No, $300,000.
Right. Well, that's less than $1 million. You did it the old-fashioned way, on foot.
Well, I also got paid more for doing the job than what I spent to get it. My father said to me when I was young, he said, all politicians are crooks. And I said, come on, Dad, you can't say that. That's a blanket statement. He says, oh, yes, I can. And I said, well, how? He said, because they pay $1 million for a job that only pays $100,000 a year.
Do the math.
Yeah. And so I could look, if my father were alive, I could look him in the eye and say, your son's not a crook, because I made $480,000 as governor, and I only spent $300 to get it.
And something tells me the establishment absolutely hates that.
Oh, well, you know how much the Democrats and Republicans and their two campaign committees spent against me? $12 million, and lost.
Well, I think that I remember it clearly. I thought it was one of the great moments that night when they announced that you had won. The talking heads on the news channels were in shock that a former professional wrestler had upset these career politicians. It was something beautiful. And
well, it truly was. But do you notice how they poo-poo it now? And of course, can it happen again? It could, but the chances become slimmer all the time for it to happen.
Well, Jesse, it's been an absolute pleasure. Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, Season 2 coming up on. When Season 2 begin?
I can't really tell you because we're just going back into production, and again, it takes a great deal of time and work to put these out. So I guess on a ballpark, I would tell you probably look for it in the fall.
And the book, Americans Conspiracies, in every bookstore in the country, and you're doing it on your own, Jesse. You don't need the traditional media to get your word out, and I respect that.
Well, thank you, but it's all the result of an American people out there, I think, that are completely unsatisfied with what they're getting right.
Complete dissatisfaction.
Yep.
Yes. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you,
but
sir.
We'll talk again sometime.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.